Welcome to Corrective Consciousness episode 191, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. I'm your host, vysethebold, and this is
Lotus Prince.
And we have another great topic-based episode here for you. We actually have been discussing doing the Half-Life series in totality here as part of Corrective Consciousness, especially considering that we have a brand new fan remake of Half-Life 1 that just recently hit its completion, and that would be Black Mesa. So I wanted to go over some history of the series as well as maybe some lesser known aspects of the series and kind of meander through what this series means. Now, I am comfortable in saying that gaming would not be where it was without Half-Life. I'm very comfortable in saying that, especially considering that one of the major companies in video gaming, Valve, is its creator, and without Half-Life, they would not be in their position that they currently are, as one of the largest marketplaces for digital content, if not the largest.
Well, speaking of which, to show how impactful Half-Life was, I mean, you know how Netflix was always a DVD mailing service, but then they set up streaming, and they did streaming for a while, but one of the things that really got a bigger audience to sign up for streaming was to put on season 4 of Arrested Development, right? We're finally continuing that show you like, and it's the only place to get it. Everyone's like, well, damn, I better get Netflix streaming then. To show how impactful Half-Life was, Steam came out around when Half-Life 2 did, and Half-Life 2 was probably one of the first games people can remember that required Steam to launch it. So you're like, well, I guess I better get Steam. I mean, Steam is free, but like I need a
They
Steam
hated
code.
it at the time, by the way. Half-Life 2 requiring, which was one of the most anticipated games of all time. It's hard to kind of put that into context if you weren't there for it, but it was, when that came out, it was probably the most highly anticipated game up to that point.
Yeah, so Steam got as big as it did because everybody wanted to play Half-Life 2. I mean, to a lesser degree, you could kind of talk about some games being Epic exclusives, like Shenmue, kind of. Shenmue 3, kind of, like on PC. It's an Epic exclusive. So if you were really
Metro
waiting for
was
Shenmue
probably
3...
Metro Exodus was probably the biggest title.
But none of
it.
that. Like the thing with Metro, that's also a good contender. Like, I gotta get Epic if I want to play Metro Exodus.
That and Overwatch. Overwatch requires that as
Overwatch?
well. Not Overwatch.
Oh, Fortnite, you mean?
Fortnite requires.
Yeah, I was like, Overwatch is Blizzard.
Epic.
But yeah,
Sorry.
but the thing is, none of those games though was as. I mean, Fortnite is insanely popular, but none of those games was as impactful to like the industry, I guess, or gaming as a medium as Half-Life 2, because gaming was. Like, Half-Life 2 was the start of an evolution of gaming. Like, Fortnite is unbelievably popular, but it's not really... I don't know how much of, like, a game changer it is. It certainly helps popularize the Battle Royale genre, I'll give it that.
I would actually say that PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is the impactful title in that.
Oh, that is true, and Fortnite took that and, made it better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, but, Half-Life was, we talked about this a bit on Reactive Consciousness, but this was not just another first-person shooter where you mindlessly run and gun. This had a plot and level structure that was integrated into the gameplay. And, what are you going to do for a sequel on a modern system where everything looks totally different? Half-Life 2 looked insanely realistic when you first started playing it. It was unbelievable. One of the things, Valve loves...
facial animations.
Facial animations. And also, Valve does enjoy patting itself on the back. look at the cool shit we could do with our engine. You know, they always had the balance beam puzzle where you put weight on the board. But
I,
the big thing in the beginning of the game was
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, Lotus. We have to talk about Half-Life 1
there was
a
a
little
Half-Life
bit.
1.
We have to talk about Half-Life
There
1
was a
first.
Fallout 1 and 2. But
Yeah,
what I was going to mention real quick was just the
yeah.
guard knocking the can off of the garbage
Oh
can and
yeah,
telling you to pick it
huge.
up. The fact that you could do
The
that.
physics,
Yeah.
the physics
Yeah.
were a big part of what Half-Life 2 is and why it was so impactful at the
Yeah.
time. But yeah, we definitely need to talk about the original game and its expansions first, because Half-Life is an insanely influential game to begin with. We kind of started this discussion earlier this week in Recon. If you want to listen to the beginning of that show for this week, please go back to that, because I'm not going to retread ground here. But I will say, just for context, that Half-Life 1 was made by Valve, which was a pretty new team working off of a modified Quake 2 engine, and it ended up being the most cinematic video game period up until that point, PC or otherwise, and it was the first time a first-person shooter really felt like it was in a realistic space. Quake 2 kind of was getting there, but it still kind of had a level-to-level feel, kind of like Doom did. Its previous games all did, but Half-Life made it feel like you were in a realistic environment with a realistic progression from place to place within those realistic environments, as well as telling a story. Everything that happens in that game, like storytelling-wise, is gleaned from overhearing conversations or viewing things in the viewing space. So that was a big deal.
Well, yeah, because like the thing with that is you would play like Wolfenstein or Doom or something, and the levels were designed in a way to make it some kind of challenge for the player.
And they were very arcadey.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, is it a maze? Do you need to find the key? Is this room difficult because there are enemies in there? But Half-Life, like
they were kind of logical extensions of like Frenzy, Berserk, and Robotron, and Smash TV.
You wouldn't find like a bathroom in Doom until like Doom 3. Duke Nukem kind of had them almost as a joke, because like
Duke Nukem 3D was the first time you saw like realistic spaces.
Yeah, Duke Nukem 3D definitely made things a little more realistic. There were bathrooms where you could flush the toilets, and it was like, yo, but like
Play
it was
pool.
It was still. I'm sorry.
You could play pool.
That was pretty wild, actually. But like that was more just like, look at the cool gimmicks we have. And Duke Nukem was still a very like shoot the baddies, and it's just all in good fun. Where Half-Life took a serious tone, and there might be like again with the bathroom, like there might be just nothing in it or whatever. It's just like, well, a facility would have a place like this.
Yeah, but the beginning of the game, for the first like hour and a half, you actually aren't killing anything. You're just moving forward on a normal day.
Yeah, that's
work.
true too. Yeah, wait for it to really go off. Again, kind of like Doom 3. The first part of the game is just getting to know the facility, and then everything... I was going to say everything goes to hell, but really building. It's the opposite.
It's all world building at the very beginning of Half-Life, and it even opens like a movie. Like you see the credits roll, and you're entering into the Black Mesa facility, and just kind of viewing the environments, the kinds of things that they have at this Black Mesa facility.
Yeah, even though Kojima had nothing to do it, it feels very Hideo Kojima.
Yeah, well, he also has an iconic cinematic style that reared its head certainly in Metal Gear Solid, and
yeah, he had the opening credits and like the voice actors below the character names when you meet them.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. They are contemporaries. Metal Gear Solid and the original Half-Life, they came out around the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's 1998 for one of them at least, and 97 for the other.
Yeah.
Or the same year, I forget, but it's right around that area. And it's actually kind of funny because they're putting Half-Life content in Death Stranding, which is Kojima's like
a match made in heaven.
Yeah, recent game. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, this game also was extremely impactful, not only for its its narrative stylization, which was completely new for the time, but it also just played extremely well. It was very
Yeah.
satisfying to play it, and it was a lot of fun to explore the environments. It just was a great game with a really cool storytelling method. But
I don't think this was the like I don't believe this was the first game to do this, but like Duke Nukem 3D, for example, I think had it, but it might have been added later. But just the concept of mouse look, because
yeah,
because Doom, you could press page up and page down to look up and down. Duke Nukem 3D, I think, eventually got mouse look, but I don't really associate the game with it, even though it's a feature. But
do the Quake games, or Quake 2 at least has mouse look.
okay,
You know,
okay. I
well,
wasn't really
it's an
familiar with
essential
Quake
part
2.
of playing the game, I should
The
say.
only way I played any of Quake 2 way back in the day, I played like a little bit of it on the N64, so obviously the mouse wasn't a thing.
I'll correct myself. Metal Gear Solid and Half-Life both came out in 1998.
How about that?
September 3rd, 1998 for Metal Gear, and let's see here. The original Half-Life is November 1998, so that were
Yeah,
released
very
right around the
close.
same time. Yeah, like within a couple months of each other. So like and they were being developed in their own ecosystem. So like they there's no way that they could have been playing off
Well,
of
yeah,
each
like
other
yeah,
or anything.
America versus Japan and completely different genres.
Yeah, yeah. So, but still, their impact on their respective ecosystems is not to be ignored.
And you know what's
Both
funny?
of them.
What both games did was not quite handle the same way, but I'll use the word anyway. Dynamic music.
Oh
Like
yeah.
when you pick up the suit in Half Life, like the
Oh,
sweet
one of the
music
coolest
kicks in,
things.
and
Yeah, one
like
of the
in
coolest
later in that
moments.
game, and of course in Half Life 2, like when the chase scene happens, there's cool music. Whereas in Metal Gear Solid, there were general tracks that would play, but if the alert ever went off, then the alert music would happen and override whatever the level theme was in that area. So you'd have to wait until that was over to get back to the normal soundtrack. And then in later Metal Gear Solid games, the music, the style of music changed because Kojima picked up. I think we've talked about this before, but the composer for the movie The Replacement Killers.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like if
yeah.
you listen to Metal Gear Solid One's music and then listen to Two's, like totally different worlds.
So that this game like informed how first person shooters would go forward from this. Like without this game, you wouldn't have Halo after that. With the way that played
Yeah.
in its single player mode, like all the Call of Duty games are informed by the original Half Life.
And that actually brings up a point as well. Have you ever heard the like I don't know what the word is for it, like a meme or a trope, which is Seinfeld isn't funny? Like, do you know what I'm
No,
talking about? Because it's like if you go back to Seinfeld now, I mean,
I
if
think it
I
ages
still think it's
incredibly
funny,
well.
but if you got a new
Yeah.
person to watch Seinfeld now, they'd be like, okay, I guess it's a pretty good show, but like others have done it better. It's the same thing for Half Life and Half Life 2, and for Resident Evil 4, where you got to take into account that like other games have improved on them because it's been like 15 years, but like those games set the standard that was improved on in the first place. There wasn't anything like it before.
Yeah. Well, I will put it this way: with the exception of the graphics and the Zen section, which is the final section, I would say the game it holds up. The original game, like the original version of the game, it holds up incredibly well. It's still extremely playable and fun. nowadays. I could go back and play it no problem and still really enjoy myself. However, Black Mesa has improved the graphics and
Yeah, yeah.
and the Zen section to be incredibly much better. So definitely go back to that version if you want to experience. You can go back and academically enjoy the original Half-Life, but I would say enjoying it in today's context with Black Mesa is the way to go.
By the way, one thing, I'm
Mhm.
not 100% sure if this is true, but Half-Life may have coined the term on a rail because there's the level that's named on a rail where you're on a rail, like you're on a car, like you can't
Yeah,
explore the level freely. Like we call games like,
Star
House of the
Fox.
Dead or something like on a rail shooters because you can't control your movement, just where you aim. So the
Yeah.
level of Half-Life on a rail, I mean, you can move within your little car, but you were basically stuck and literally on a rail.
Yeah, Star Fox and Panzer Dragoon are like that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah. They were on
Yeah,
a rail before the term on a rail might have existed.
yeah, exactly. Well, that's an interesting fact that I didn't even think
I'm
of.
not sure if it's necessarily a fact, but like
Mhm.
it seems true.
Now, what came after this is quite where a major part of the influence of Half-Life comes from. Not only was it the base game extremely important to video game history, but the way that they set up Half-Life was similar to was pretty much unlike anything before it. They encouraged fan modding communities immediately with the game. You could there was an option in Half-Life Half-Life's menu to like load a mod. So kind of like
Yeah,
with
that's pretty
Doom,
crazy.
Doom before it, you could add custom WADs,
Yeah.
fan-made WADs. They wanted to include something similar to that. So their thought was that most people, what they were going to do was add like new levels or new environments via the modding tools, which were robust and free. However, people went nuts with it and created all kinds of genres of games.
Oh yeah.
And I'm the this the official stuff is just the start of it. But
Yeah, there's entirely
eventually,
different games. There's like SCP and Containment Breach from like Half-Life 2, I want to say.
oh well, I'm gonna go and list a few things. But in 1999, um, a few things popped up that were official things that started off as fan projects for Half-Life. The first of all being the first official first player one player one expansion called Opposing Force, where
Hmm.
you play as the mercenaries or the government hired kill team Black Ops people to that were basically killing all the scientists
Yeah,
and coming after you in the game.
that kind of makes me think of Resident Evil 2, where you play as Hunk and Fourth Survivor.
Yeah, exactly,
I mean, like
exactly.
our heroes never meet Hunk, but it's a similar premise.
And that was the world's introduction to Gearbox software, which is now a major company. So they're the makers of Borderlands, of course. So this was a big thing. I enjoyed uh, this expansion. What they ended up doing was they changed up the way that the game kind of played. In that in the original Half-Life, what was cool was that you didn't just have uh, you had a lot of military weaponry, but you also had like things like your HEV suit and your crowbar. The crowbar was like a big deal at
Oh
the
yeah.
time as a physical weapon. It's still a lot of fun to use with the way that they made it. But I think that what they wanted to do in Opposing Force was they wanted to make sure that you didn't have like so similar weapons that it wasn't worth playing.
Well,
So what
not to mention, just like in universe, why would this government kill squad have like a fucking crowbar?
Yeah, exactly. So you have a knife in it, like you
Yeah, that makes
would.
more sense, like a military knife or something.
Yeah, yeah, a combat knife. But opposing force, you actually ended up having some cool weapons that you wouldn't normally have. I think several of them were like organic. Like you could use like alien like stuff
Oh, very
in it.
nice.
So I thought that was a lot of fun. Yeah, there was. Let me see here. Um, I forget exactly. I'm gonna look up opposing force weapons, but Half-Life opposing force weapons. But that's what I remember of it. I played through all of them back in the day. Um, I hope they remake this because they've never remade this or even ported it to anything. So weaponry, opposing force weapons. Let's take a look at this. So yeah, let me see here. Weapons. Pipe wrench, combat knife, barnacle grapple. That's what I remember. So those barnacles that you had on the ceiling that were a hazard and an enemy in the
Yeah,
original
the thing I
Half-Life.
mentioned in Reactive that you could actually lure the mercenaries into because they get just sucked up to the ceiling and their guts just spit out.
Yeah, it was used both as a weapon and a grappling hook. You could actually like use it in your hands.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, this is like a forgotten piece of it because like they've never really remade opposing force. So there was the let me see here, Desert Eagle. So there's a lot of military weaponry, but I remember just um, there the Snark, the Spore Launcher, the Shock Roach. Yeah, so a lot of them were organic, and that was like the major, uh, gimmick in this game. It was a lot of fun, and also kind of played. It also popularized like jump crouching. Like it was a necessary
Oh,
mechanic in that
yeah,
game.
that was one of the. Yeah, I was just gonna say it's necessary because yeah, there were some places where you had the jump crouch
Yes.
where in other games you might have considered that some sort of exploit. Like I discovered a thing,
No, you
but
needed to
yeah,
do
you
it.
must. Yeah,
They actually have like a point early in the game that basically teaches you no, you'll need to be using this mechanic for the rest of the
yeah,
game.
yeah. You know what it makes me
Kind of
think
like in a
of?
Mega Man.
Even though it makes me think of Donkey Kong Country 1 and Donkey Kong Country 2. Because in Donkey Kong Country 1, some players discovered that you can roll off of a ledge and then jump, and that made some platforming way easier. So in Donkey Kong Country 2, certain things were designed with that in mind. Like they would have trails of bananas leading off and then suddenly bouncing up, and you're like, what? And it turns out that that was intended that time. It's pretty great.
Around that same time in 1999, you also have the commercial release of Counter Strike,
Yeah, that
which
was
is insanely influential. It's
like
still
that and
being played
StarCraft
today.
were just like endlessly played by everybody.
A lot of people forget that this was originally just a Half-Life mod that people just played for free. It was a lot of fun, and people have been playing that ever since. It's a new version of Counter Strike, but it all stems from this original version. This is also where Team Fortress Classic started. Of course, Team Fortress Classic is a remake of the original Team Fortress, which was a mod for Quake 2. But this is where it really gets going and basically becomes an official Valve product. And of course, we have TF2 these days, which is still
Yeah.
being heavily played,
Hmm.
and an insanely influential series that we wouldn't have Overwatch without it, which
Yeah.
is like one of the biggest games being played right now. Overwatch is basically an evolution of TF2.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have Overwatch without Half-Life. Like this is all stemming off of Half-Life. Is like this one game birthed all of this stuff. Then from there, a less influential expansion was
Blue Shift.
Blue Shift, yeah, where you played as Barney, the security guard. It was fun, but it was more puzzle based and
Yeah.
is less known and less played. And then after that, we had Half-Life Decay, which was the co-op mode that we talked about a little while ago. That was on exclusive to the PlayStation 2. So that was an influential co-op mode because we probably wouldn't have Portal 2's co-op mode without it. Co-op mode in Portal 2 is very kind of working off of that. So all of these things are extremely influential. Like Half-Life wasn't just Half-Life; it was a service, a spawning off point for creativity to happen, and Valve encouraged all these fan communities to make these things and reward the people and get support for when they made stuff. That's an insanely influential idea. If it weren't for all of that stuff and what they did, we wouldn't have several companies today and huge communities. And then we had Half-Life 2, which we went into. Half-Life 2 was insanely significant because it was on its brand new source engine, which is still being used today. With especially in Counter-Strike and Day of Defeat, people and TF2. All of these things are running off of the source engine. It was insanely influential. The physics in it were the most realistic at the time and were so much fun to play with.
And a lot more, kind of conversational. Gordon Freeman doesn't talk, but there's a lot more dialogue for him because you ran into scientists and security guards in Half-Life 1. They're like, oh, hello, I'll get the door for you. But there wasn't really a lot of exposition, and there's definitely a bunch of that going on, and also NPCs to each other in Half-Life 2. And by the way, Half-Life 1 had a subtlety that I was not aware of for years, and probably a lot of other people weren't either. But do you know those aliens, the electric shooting ones, the Vortigaunts?
The Vortigaunts, yeah.
What really threw me in Half-Life 2 is that they're just your allies, and I was like...
Why are they your allies now? Yeah.
Yeah, what happened? Well, it turns out that they were being compelled against their will to fight you in Half-Life 1.
They have slave collars in Half-Life 1.
Exactly. But you know what? You know what is really clever that a lot of players, including me, did not know about? They don't really want to fight you. They have to. If you shoot them and don't kill them, they'll just run away. Like, they won't fight to the death unless you just, machine gun them right there. Like, they won't choose to fight to the death. They'll be like, all right, fuck this, I'm out of here. So they were never really your enemies. They kind of, half-heartedly fought you. So in Half-Life 2, they're full-on allies. I thought it was a jarring change, and it turns out it really wasn't.
Yeah, I really love that. That's part of the strength of the environmental storytelling of these games.
That's like some FromSoft shit, like the mechanics of the enemies.
Yeah. No, this was a big thing, and the game, it had some of the best music I've ever heard in a video game, like contextual music that was amazing.
Yeah, I was just
You always felt like a badass.
Like some of the tracks you could listen to just on their own on YouTube or something, but results may vary, but in context, when something happens, it works really well. It's kind of like listening to the Rez soundtrack by itself. It's okay, but it's playing the game that makes it work.
It also had a lot of fun vehicle sections in Half-Life 2. It was a lot of fun to use the buggy in it, the Doom buggy.
I really liked the speedboat. That one part where you had to ride up the ramp and turn and go down the other side of the ramp to circumvent the wall. That was just super clever at the time.
It was a lot of fun. It was really amazing. So, one of the things that can't be ignored is the showcase weapon of this game, which was the force gun. So the force gun allowed you to pick up objects in the game and fling them. Yeah, the gravity gun.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal. Like the physics of this game were such that they really wanted you to use this game as a showcase of the physics of this engine.
Especially in Ravenholm, where there's just saw blades lying everywhere.
Ravenholm is one of the coolest sections of any video game ever. Much so that
horror first person.
It's so much so that they used Ravenholm as the demo for the game, and rightfully so.
I mean, that had shit where you're pressing buttons and dropping traps on things. It was like a whole, the entire level was a showcase.
Yeah, it was amazing. You're basically defending your position constantly against zombies in the game,
Yeah.
and it was just so much fun. And trying to you're basically out of ammo at that point in the game. There's no way to get
You don't have that much.
more ammo very easily. So you have to be creative in what you use as weapons, and the
Cinder blocks and shit.
you want to be able to keep the really good items that like the said saw blades around and find them after you use them,
Yeah,
because
like you're
basically
cutting off enemies' heads, which is already pretty wild, and the saw blades are getting embedded into the wall and can be pulled back out. It's like, whoa, that was insane for the
no
time.
other game had ever done anything like this. Just to give you
Oh,
context.
well, actually, speaking of which, your statement is true, but it just reminds me. I didn't play Half-Life 2 until later. I played Doom 3 first, and Doom 3's expansion, Resurrection of Evil, had a gravity gun, which
Yeah.
broke the entire game. And I remember seeing on forums all over the place, what the hell, I ripped off of Half-Life 2. I was like,
It's
what,
like
it did?
Half-Life 2, but not as good.
I know, and I was like, what do you mean I ripped off of
Yeah.
Half-Life 2? And then I finally played Half-Life 2, I was like, oh, okay.
It was cool and novel on its own, but if you had already played Half-Life 2, you would actually thought it was limited.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. In
Yeah.
Half-Life 2, it was a very creative thing to do, but Doom doesn't have objects lying around, so what you were really supposed to do with the gravity gun in Doom 3 was catch enemy fireballs and reflect them back at them.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it dealt insane damage. You could play almost the entire game with just the gravity gun. It was extremely broken, whereas in Half-Life 2, it's only as good as the level you're in. It's like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, he loses half of his moveset if he's in a place that's not completely full of skyscrapers.
Exactly. Well, playing this game is so much fun. It has several sections. It has also some NPCs that start following you around, and it changes
Yeah.
the dynamic of the game.
And they could die.
And you feel bad when they die too, because they really look up to you. And
I mean, not the hardcore plot heavy people. Those people
No.
aren't in the actual battles, but you'll get some
you feel bad about
renegades.
NPCs.
I'll take part in this
randos.
fight with you, and yeah.
Yeah, and one of the coolest things ever is like you are over often a certain doing something on your own, and your randos start taking down one of the most terrifying enemies in the game by themselves.
The War of the Worlds walkers, the
Stalkers, the Striders, yeah, the Striders, that's right. They take down a Strider without your help, and you see it, and there are explosions going on all around you, and if you have like a really nice sound system, it was just like so cool to see. You're like, oh, my helpers really grew up. My little
and
kids,
they're actually helping.
It was just so cool to see them take one of those down.
Because that was one thing that Half-Life 2 really did right. Nobody likes escort missions because your partner sucks and will probably die, and you have to lose and restart. But in Half-Life 2, your partners are not terrible, and if they die, you can just keep going because they're no-name characters.
Yeah, but you do miss them.
You
for
do,
sure.
but it doesn't you don't break the game because of something that isn't your fault.
It's true. Now, Half-Life 2, just like Half-Life 1, had usable mods.
Yeah.
It was a heavily modded game, and lots of stuff was being worked on for it. With it, a lot of people did all kinds of things, like the aforementioned, TF2 Day of Defeat, and then eventually, Portal was made. The precursor to Portal was made, called Narbacular Drop, by some people at college, basically. And
that was the funny thing. They kind of Portal itself was kind of thrown into the Orange Box collection as like, oh, we also made this, and it ended up being the star of the show.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go out and explain this as well. So from the sequel to Half-Life 2 did come out. It was called Half-Life 2 Episode 1. They started to release these mini expansions to Half-Life 2, and they were released episodically. So this was really the first company to really be successful with it, and the success is kind of even that is kind of limited. The other companies that have tried it, like when they tried to do that game Sin, which failed horribly when that came out, and also well, Final Fantasy VII is going to the remake is going
Well, I
to
mean,
be
that game's so big that people are just like they gotta play it.
that'll be successful definitely.
But what I was thinking actually was Siren on PS3, because Europe got the Blu-ray disc, but in America they had to buy it in episodes. But the problem with that is that, unlike Half-Life 2, no one in America really knows what Siren is, even though we got it on PS2, and they didn't want to buy fucking episodic installments of this relatively obscure game that they don't really care about in the first place.
Yeah, the only place where this has really been successful is the adventure game space, like Walking Dead, and all the Telltale games.
Yeah,
have
even
been,
then,
yeah.
Telltale has already established its identity, and so has The Walking Dead. Like, these episodic things work because I love Half-Life 1, I love Half-Life 2, I'm already invested, let me see more of it. Oh, it's in episodes, I guess I'll go for it. Instead of, like, I'm making a brand new game that's in episodes. Like,
Kentucky Route Zero is a successful one that just finished, actually. So Kentucky Route Zero finally got its last part.
I didn't know it was an episodic game.
Yeah, neither did I. I never I never ended up playing it. But
Yeah.
I own it, but I've never ended up playing it. But anyway, Half-Life 1, Half-Life 2 Episode 1 was a big deal because your major companion character, Alex, from the first game, becomes even more important in this one.
Yeah, and so does Dog.
It's a shorter experience, and Dog is awesome in this.
Dog is like
game.
one of the best characters, and he's a robot.
Yeah, that can't talk.
Yes.
He can emote, though. He moves his head up and down when he's happy and all that kind of stuff. Dog is awesome.
You play catch with him where you're the one catching.
Yeah, Dog is awesome, and you get to fight a Strider in this game on your own, and it is terrifying. It's menacing you.
The problem with Striders is that they take, like, I forgot how many, like...
It's like 3 or 4 rockets, something like that.
Well, yeah, like, the problem is it's usually more rockets than you have on you, and bullets really don't do anything.
No.
So, like, you basically can't fight Striders unless you have one of those, like, infinite ammo boxes lying around in plot contextual areas, which is why, like, in that one area in Half-Life 2, the base game, where you were killing a bunch of Striders, like, you're positioned near one of those boxes, because it's supposed to be more of a set piece than a survival thing. But in Half-Life 2 Episode 1, you're not... You can go find more rockets, but it's like, you gotta, like, run and avoid the Strider while you're doing that, and it's really intense.
Well, you're on the ground when this happens. Like in the original game, you're on a skyscraper and you're fighting it kind of like on its own level.
Yeah.
But it has the clear advantage in Episode 1, and it's menacing you the whole time, and you can't get rockets until much later. Yeah. So you have no way of fighting it. It is basically like
houses that are far apart from each other and driving that buggy. It sucks.
It is basically like the Nemesis, like, but you have no way of stalling it either. You just have to fucking run.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite gameplay mechanics, is having a Nemesis-like creature like fucking menacing you.
There was that one level in the base game where you have to climb the skyscraper from the inside, where the Strider's just pacing around the outside, so you have to just stealth the entire trip upstairs, where there's no enemies in the building, but there's just a goddamn Strider just hanging outside the windows and everything. It's awful.
Yeah, and, this was a much shorter experience. It was an episode. It's an episodic game, so it kind of ends... all of these end on cliffhangers. Let's just put it that way.
Episode 1 ends on, like, what?
Yeah,
I gotta see what happens next. Episode 2 has a quieter ending, but it's clearly leading to something that never happens.
Yeah, so Half-Life 2 Episode 2 is... actually an insanely influential game on as part of its entirety. So the way that this was released is it wasn't just released by itself. It was released as part of a project by Valve called the Orange Box, where they released several smaller games all at once.
Yeah, it was Half-Life 2 Episodes 1 and 2, and Team Fortress 2, and Portal.
And Portal, yeah, all at once.
And maybe Half-Life 2 base game?
Yeah, it comes with the base game if you didn't already own it.
Okay.
Yes. So this was also when most of the consoles got all of these games.
Yeah.
That was really the main concept behind it. So this is how a lot of people were introduced to this, and this is like insanely influential. Mostly because like Portal was released right alongside Half-Life 2 Episode 2. Now, Portal, you may be wondering why we're talking so much about this. Portal is actually part of the Half-Life universe. It is a Half-Life game, and it is an entirely new concept using the physics engine, the source physics engine of Half-Life 2. If you don't know what Portal is, I don't know what you've been doing, but it's an
You're
insanely
clearly not
influential
thinking of
game.
Portals.
Yeah, I mean, Portal is one of the most influential games ever, and a lot of people know Portal on its own outside of Half-Life.
Yeah, what blew everyone's mind about Portal was that when you set up two portals and you go through one and out the other, it was completely seamless. And it's
Yes.
not like you have to walk all the way through. You can walk part way through. You could see yourself on the other side. You can shoot portals on the floor and ceiling in infinite fall. It was absolutely insane.
And an entire game based on puzzle solving using the physics and limitations thereof, and with a really awesome antagonist, like one of the
Yes,
best antagonists in video game
passive
history.
aggressive for
Um,
days.
GLaDOS, which is the one of the best foils of any game ever.
She's like a snarkier Shodan from System Shock 2.
Exactly, and really great, insanely stylized, a lot of fun, and Portal 2 is even better if you ask me. But
Portal 2 just does unbelievable things with its level design and narrative.
yeah, the narrative of both games is so much fun. But once again, I will stress that this is based off of a fan creation called Narbacular Drop. It was built off of that. So definitely check that out if you want to see some history. And also to help recognize that Valve continually encouraged fan projects throughout its entire history, from start to finish, and still does. People who make Gary's Mod, which is a staging software for using the Source engine and for posing all kinds of things in it and making comics and movies and stuff. It's just so much fun. But yeah, Half-Life 2 Episode 2 had more of a focus on. This one had kind of squad-based elements, didn't it? If I remember right, and used more open environments and vehicle combat, if I remember right, especially towards the end of it. But it once you get to the end of it, that is it for Half-Life.
Yeah.
The only other Half-Life game after this was Portal 2. So Portal 2 is the last thing that we have that is part of the Half-Life universe until just recently,
Yeah.
which was announced. The Half-Life VR Alex was just announced as well. So that I'm definitely looking forward to. But apparently, the original plan was, Half-Life episodes were going to be in 3 parts, and then end with Half-Life 2 Episode 3. And then eventually they said, this episodic thing isn't working for us, so we're just going to make Half-Life 3, and then that never happened. And one of the things that, Gabe Newell keeps kind of saying about this whole thing is that he wants... the thing is, when they made a new Half-Life game, when they made Portal, when they made Portal 2, each of these things was extremely impactful, and I don't think he was completely happy with Half-Life 2 Episode 2, because it really didn't push the game forward.
Yeah, it pushed the story forward, but yeah, it didn't bring anything radically new to the table.
Whereas, like, Half-Life 1 was an insanely influential game, and Half-Life 2 might have even been more influential, especially in terms of, it being the scion of a platform. So it's I know there's been all kinds of, like, false starts and, like, half-developed, things that have been going on in Valve, and they just don't want to release it because they want Half-Life to be a tentpole series that is impactful on the industry. And it's really hard to do that, it turns out, trying to be an insanely impactful thing with every single release is extremely difficult, and it doesn't always work out that way.
Mm-hmm.
But they have an insanely good track record, and their missteps have been like minor at best. So it's just kind of disappointing that they never finished the story, because the story is like one of the coolest parts about Half-Life. But I guess they see them being the scions of virtual reality as a mainstream medium. It is now better than ever in being a mainstream technology, but it's still not quite there yet. It is still something that is kind of awkward to get going. It's not convenient, and it's expensive. And I still think, even when Half-Life Alyx comes out, that we'll still have problems with it being, all of those things, but it'll still be a great experience if they're willing to release it. It has to be really good in order for them to make a new entry in this series, because everything's been great. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't think I'll ever be able to play it unless it comes out for PSVR, or they have a cheaper Vive option or something, that I could buy at a reasonable amount of money. $300 and under. I'm all there. I'm there for it. $200 is a great price point for something like that. So I hope eventually, I'll be able to play that. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Half-Life. How about you there, Lotus?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Okay, I would like to move on to fan stuff here.
Why, sure. So, School Filmer says, I do remember growing up with an NES at someone else's place and used to really enjoy what they had, be it Duck Hunt, Super Mario Brothers, North and South, Metal Gear. Not to
North
mention
and South, wow.
Yeah, not to mention the Nintendo magazines I read a lot while over there. At first, I, too, was hesitant in using seeds in Dragon Quest XI's, but I did find out you can grind for them late game from certain enemies. And with either certain equipments or pep powers, Hallelujah works best, even if it means grinding casino tokens and buying pep pips or Jade and Eric and the hero's pep up ability. And with enough determination, you can max out skill trees for each character and really build up their stats. Also, Vice's Gorgon Ramsay remark when talking about Hot Ones was pretty funny. Not only does he hate your cooking, he's going to turn you to stone. I did have my own reference to that. Goragon Ramsay. Not only does he think your cuisine is queasiness-inducing, he's going to really mess up reality itself and brainwash someone close to you and make them chase you with a laser rifle. So apparently that was a reference to Mr. Smoozles Goes Nutso. Man, I still don't know what that is. That's so obscure. All right, Josh 111888 says, for stuff you don't really like using in games, I tend to not use special bullet types when they're available. Like New Vegas in particular had regular rounds, bulk ammo, hollow points, and armor piercing. I don't want to go into the pause menu for every other enemy to choose the best bullet for the exact scenario. Yeah, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dracologist says, why does Excitebots remind me of, like, acronym spelling, SCARS, SCARS? I don't know.
I remember that.
I don't know what either of those things is.
SCARS was like a it's like kind of like battle tanks is what I equate it to. It was like one of those things, kind of series back then.
All right, so for our question, Insane Buffoon asks, what is the biggest deciding factor for you when purchasing a new game? That's kind of a tough one. Like, I usually, like, unless it's something that's following a series I've been hyped for, I usually actively choose not to buy the latest hyped AAA game because you know there's going to be 1,000,000,000 copies of them and they're going to be like half price in like a month. So I usually look for weird stuff that kind of catches my interest that I think will disappear.
Yeah, so I'm really the same way. We kind of have similar purchasing habits, I would say. Just like but with different things.
Like I'll buy fucking like Raging Loop, for example,
Exactly.
but like God of War PS4, like I started playing it like a couple weeks ago, you know, because I know that game's just going to be around.
Yeah, we both tend to not buy AAA releases when they first release, unless it's something I can't help myself with. For instance,
Breath of the Wild for you.
Breath of the Wild. I was actually just going to say that
Yeah.
I couldn't help myself. I bought a brand new system just to play that, and it was completely worth it. Another one that I'm going to buy right away that's more timely is Doom Eternal. I'm going to buy that right the fuck away. One of my favorite games of all time is Doom 2016. I absolutely love it. It's probably in my top 10 games of all time still. I really love Doom 2016, and from all accounts, all of the early opinions of Doom Eternal have stated that it's somehow better. Like
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like a jumping off point for this new one. So I am all about it. I am going to play it right away, and I'm going to love it. I can't wait to play it. But other than that, I usually only buy stuff that will have a scarcity to it, just as Lotus was saying. Or if it comes with something that means something to me. For instance, I bought Samurai Showdown on the Switch because it came with
Oh, the
with a
Neo
Neo
Geo.
Geo
Yeah,
Pocket
yeah.
Color game, but
Yeah, no,
that
I
was
get that.
important to me. It was a unique item that like you can't buy on its own. So
Mm-hmm.
that was important to me. Unique. Classic re-releases mean something to me as well, especially if it's something that has a lot of history behind it. Like I bought the collection of Mana right away because they translated the third game officially for
Yeah.
the first time ever, and that means something to me. I really
Mm-hmm.
love when I really love when extra effort is put in. So I will buy something if it's something special. In other words, I bought Death Stranding when it first came out as well. Turns out that I got distracted and haven't gone back to it. But I don't see that as um, a mistake or anything like that. It's just one of it really depends, but most of the time I'll wait a few months or even a couple of years down the line, and I'll pick up a game when it's complete, when it has all of its expansions and all that
Oh yeah,
stuff.
that's
Yeah.
a good point. Like I've said before that I won't buy a game until it's out, and people are like, no, it is out. I'm like, no, episode 1 is out. Like I still haven't
Yeah.
even considered playing Bloodstained yet because all of its content isn't out. I know the game's brilliant. I'll wait till it's done. You know.
Enter the Gungeon's a complete game now, and you just
Yep,
started playing
same
that.
thing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
started playing Gungeon because I finally felt that I could.
Yeah, and Enter the Gungeon just got better and better over time. I don't think they planned on adding to it like they did either. It just sold well enough that they could. Um, but yeah, that game just got better and better over time, and then became a complete product. They're not adding anything else other than bug fixes from now on. So, um, I mean, Hollow Knight was like that too. They added a ton of content to that game that
Yeah,
it
same
didn't
thing. I
originally
bought that
have.
game when a complete version was available to buy.
Yeah, yeah, definitely good on you for that.
And same goes
So,
for the Souls games as well. Like, I mean, not that I really played them as soon as they came out, but even so, I waited till the DLC was available before I got on them.
and for instance, most Bethesda RPGs I won't buy right away. I'll wait until they have all of their content out because they always have tons of content.
Yeah, they have a
Like
lot.
Fallout 4 had a ton of DLC. Fallout 3 had a ton of DLC. New all that stuff. Skyrim had a ton of DLC.
Oh yeah. And even Witcher 3, as
Witcher
great a game as
3,
that
yeah, I
is,
was
that
just
has a
gonna say
couple of
that.
things of DLC as well.
Exactly.
And from what some people have said, I think it was Blood and Wine maybe might even
Yeah.
be better than the base game, which is insane.
Apparently, Blood and Wine is one of the best things ever, like on its own. That's saying a lot. So yeah, that's basically what goes through our heads. I mean, I
Even if it's a game
pre-order.
I'm not really passionate about, like I sold it later, but I actually bought like Nitro Plus Blaster Z. I'm not overly passionate about Nitro Plus games. I have Saya Uda, I guess. Saya's in the game. That's pretty cool. But like that's one of those things that I paid for because I wanted to like see if we could get more weirdness like that coming over, like that Dengeki Bunko game, which actually was not very good. But it's like, stuff like that, just weird stuff that Japan might not be confident America wants. Like how even when Suda51 got a following in America, Killer is Dead still wasn't going to happen until Xseed was like, we like weird shit and brought that over. I
Yeah.
want to encourage stuff like that.
Yeah, so just to give you like kind of a microcosm of what I have pre-ordered right now, I have two things pre-ordered, and this is a microcosm of like the way I feel. I have Doom Eternal for PC, which has a freebie with it, which you could get for pre-ordering it, which is a PC version of Doom 64.
Yeah, that's insane.
Um, And the other thing that I have pre-ordered is Disaster Report 4, which is a special old thing that is getting a release. So,
Wait, hasn't
um,
that been on the Nipponichi store for like ever?
yes, but it's not out until April 7th.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, so,
I can probably count my number of pre-orders on my fingers, like in my entire life.
yeah, I mean, Disaster Report 4 was something that I was just like, okay, I'm pre-ordering that just because of how special it
Yeah,
is.
I might actually go for Disaster Report 4, but well, actually, no. Oh no, you know what? No, I have pre-ordered a bunch of collector's editions because I know those are gonna
Yeah,
disappear.
exactly.
But as far as like, oh, I want to play this game on day one, that's what I meant. I could count on my hands. I actually have pre-ordered stuff on like again collector's editions or like rare releases like relatively frequently, but games I could not wait to play right now, probably like Zelda Twilight Princess, Soul Calibur 2. I don't think I even pre-ordered Soul Calibur 2. I just went there on day
I
one and like
pre-ordered it.
I think I
Yeah.
went there like that morning and just like, give me that game. Soul Calibur 2, Resident Evil 4, Asura's Wrath, I think. Um, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. I don't know if there's been any other game that I'm like in the store, like, give me that game. I must play it as soon as I get home. Well, yeah, Sonic Adventure DX. I was pretty hyped about that. Like the GameCube
Yeah.
version because I didn't have a Dreamcast.
Phantom Pain was something I wanted to play right away, and I
Oh,
got
I
absorbed
gotcha.
into.
I
But
didn't get a PS4 for years, but I was hyped to play Metal Gear Solid 4, actually.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, Disaster Report 4 is something special. I'm going to reiterate why. So, this is a game that was originally slated to be released the same week of the tsunami that hit Japan that like caused the Fukushima reactor
Mm-hmm.
to be destroyed. And was an extremely hurtful time for Japan. It definitely traumatized the nation as a natural disaster. And Disaster Report is an entire series about natural disasters destroying parts of Japan
Yeah.
and trying to survive it. So out of yeah, and reasonably so, out of respect, the makers of the game IREM, who is a classic game company,
Yeah.
decided not to release the game, and it was finished in gold and was like
Yeah, it
basically
sucks.
printed out. It was set to come out. They had to basically destroy the game, and the entire company went under. A classic, game company from long ago that had made tons of great games. Um, was all of a sudden bankrupt because their big game for PS3 could not be released.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Like, when the game finally does come out, it's basically a remaster of the PS3 title, kind of like the Yakuza Collection.
Yeah, so this is something special. This is a game that was like we never got that was going to come out, and in some ways it's kind of cool that it got a second life because they added new content and better fidelity to it, and it probably is going to play a lot better than it would have.
Yeah, probably. But speaking of games that we never got, I know some of that stuff like made it to Europe, but not America. America did get Raw Danger, but we didn't get the original Disaster Report, did we?
No, we did. We got Disaster Report and Raw Danger, which is the second one.
Okay.
They're both for PS2.
Yes.
Raw Danger's the second one. The third one is the one we didn't get, which is the PSP game. It's a PSP Japan only title. Unfortunately, we don't have any availability whatsoever on that one. But this is really cool that we get this game gets a second chance at life.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be the best game in the series by far, because like those games,
they certainly had enough time to work on it.
One and two were interesting, but they were on the PS2, so it was limited by what they could do on the system. It was pre-HD, and they also were kind of janky but fun kind of things. Fun experiences. Is something unique going around in realistic environments, that are destroyed and trying to survive within them. But this is a whole nother ball game. It's going to be in HD and have like so many more possibilities in terms of environments.
Sure.
So it's really cool, and it's neat that they got the funding that they needed in order to finally release it. So,
by the
way,
just to seriously backtrack, this is just kind of funny, but I remember one other game that I pre-ordered that I actually wanted to play when I got it, which is a game that nobody else really knows or cares about, which is the White Day remaster and localization.
Sure.
And the only reason I cared about that was that I'd played the Korean-only PC game from 2000.
Yep. These are the things we care about, folks.
Yeah.
It's like I cannot wait for another Neo Geo Pocket Color game so I could pre-order that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
This is what I want. I want this way more than whatever AAA release that you could think of.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I wasn't playing the Final Fantasy VII demo. Like, I was streaming Deathmark on PS4, and I look forward to playing the sequel to Deathmark, which some people don't even know exists.
Deathmark? But anyway... Oh, hi, Mark. But anyway.
Oh, that was a bit of a reach.
Yes. All right, I think we should wrap things up. What do you say?
Why, sure.
That is the show for this week. How many questions do we have left?
We have a bunch. We have like 4 or 5.
Okay. Well, we still need more. We always want plenty in the hopper. We want to thank all of our fans who contributed questions. Please keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own via the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. Helps promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesday for our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in our lives. Finally, you can friend me as vysethebold on pretty much anything.
And you could follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you are interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or getting in conversations with me and other patrons on Discord, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
All right, everybody. Keep your nose clean. We will see you next week.
Until next time, everyone.
Bye-bye.